Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, we're going to be talking about how not to end up with a sociopath at your Christmas table this year. And that may shock you because that word means some things you may not know about. And I'm with our favorite licensed professional counselor, Kyle Hargrove. We're going to dig into this topic. Holidays are awful for a lot of people. When we're cutting this episode, Thanksgiving just passed. Ours was amazing. It was just beautiful. Lots of people had a great time. And then there's other people that's like, no, it was terrible. Like, I wish I'd never gone. And I've heard all of it and everything in between. And then we've got this holiday coming up, supposed to be the big thing. One of the big things, like Christmas and Easter. Like, that's it. If you're Christian, like, let's do the holiday right. And there's people dreading this holiday. And so Kyle and I were talking a little bit about some of the people that might show up and what some of these terms mean. And I learned something about the word sociopath. So he's like, what do you think that means? And I'm immediately waxing Jeffrey Dahmer, right? And he's like, no, do tell. That's a
psychopath.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, you want to avoid them both. Let's just put it that way first.
Okay, good.
There's neither of those are good choices when it comes to roommates or friends or family or associates. So, none of those are going to be fun folks to be around. And the psychopaths they're psychotic. They're delusional, dissociated people that are not in touch and not in context with reality. And they may have a hero complex or some type of a complex where they feel like, they're better than everybody else, and they seek power over people. And the way that they achieve that power is through acts of violence, sometimes that end in death.
Okay.
So we're going to leave that one right where it lies.
Yeah, I don't want him at my table.
We don't really want those people around him or hers. But the sociopaths, and this is a little scary, and you hate to get negative around the holiday season and so forth, but with all of the commercial aspect of the Christmas season and the giving season, as we like to say, there are a lot of opportunities for people to get taken advantage of, both commercially and otherwise. And it's been a common theme over the last few months in therapy with my clients, for people to be, I don't know what the best word is to describe it. They're down and out. They're disappointed. They're having a difficult time having a great deal of trust and faith in humanity. And as I think about that more, the specifics of those stories have to do with people who are doing as they please in relationships, both personally and professionally. People that we might hire or contract with to do a job or something that we need to happen. It happens in a lot of different settings. And what we're finding is that people are developing more and more sociopathic behavior on the daily. It's not an unusual thing. It's not abnormal to find out that somebody paid for something and didn't get it. It's not abnormal to find out that the quality of something we hired to have done is far less than what we expected or what we used to get. It's not unusual to find that people make choices in their relationships that are devastating to other people in the relationships. And what separates the sociopath is that the sociopathic behavior is characterized by a disregard for other people.
Ouch.
We don't care how they feel. Mm-hmm. We don't care what they think. And we don't care how badly what we choose to do may hurt them. It's a very egocentric stance to take in order to be a sociopath.
So we ended up with an extra chair at our table this Thanksgiving because a friend of one of my kids' parents um, divorced last year, 2 years ago, something like that. And they went their separate ways with new people in their life without telling their college student. And so this person was just kind of left. Hello, nobody said anything. They just went on these trips and well, I'm in California or I'm, where, and it's like, oh my goodness. And so when, as you're describing all of this, it sounds like selfishness, like to the max. And then on top of that, it's like, well, what's the difference? Like, you're a clinician, so what's the difference between narcissism and sociopathy? I always thought narcissism was extreme selfishness and disregard for others, but sociopathy sounds like it lines. I'm sure I'm missing something with that.
I don't think you are. I think there are probably overlapping characteristics from both of those definitions.
Mm.
The I don't suppose being a narcissist necessarily means a lack of a conscience. I don't think that a narcissist is typically going to be following their conscience, but sociopathy or sociopathy or whatever the word might be today, it does contain that item, or it does lack that item. It lacks a conscience and an extreme antisocial attitudes. And I mean, how many times in the last 2 weeks, let's say 10 to 14 days, how many times have you gone onto any kind of just a general social media page and not seen a video of a bunch of people running into a large store with big bags and filling them with whatever they choose?
Yeah.
And, between all of the videographers in the store that are just standing there with their phones taking pictures of it, and the store employees who are now petrified to even intervene in the least way. These folks are just coming into wherever they want, whether it be a big store or a little store, mom and pop. They are committing acts that are illegal, both in terms of theft and violence and all different types of things. They've no concern whatsoever. And anytime there's a thief involved, there's very little, if any, concern about the outcome for the victim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's terrifying.
But this is across our society. This is not just a one-off thing that you see here and there. An example of it maybe here and there. It is happening everywhere, all the time. And I imagine that there are very few people that may be listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube who have not fallen victim to a sociopathic behavior, whether it's a decision made in a relationship, whether it's how we might decide, to say, well, I can say these things and I know they're going to be hurtful, but it's just the way I am. Mm-hmm. It's just the way God made me. So that's the way it is. And you got to live with it. As simple as that, all the way to big robberies and maybe even physical violence on people.
Yeah. And you watch the news for like more than 27 seconds. And I have several different news sources, a couple of which are outside of mainstream media. So there's a lot of stuff that people aren't seeing. They're not being covered by mainstream media, that I'm like, oh my word, I can only handle so much of this, because it does affect my mood. The more of that I see, two things. First thing is, I'm so thankful I don't live in a city, in a city, right? Like downtown in a city, having to walk to get my groceries and walk back. Like, I pray for people I don't even know having to do that every day. Like, that's terrifying. And then on top of that, I'm just very, very grateful that the stuff that's happened, because there's been some shocking kinds of things with people that are supposed to be people of character. Even they're starting to make that slide. That I can't even wrap my brain around it. Like, what is happening? Is it a collective depression? the America is suffering? Like, what's going on here?
I don't have a definitive answer for you, but I can tell you a couple of things. I think for people that consider one of the daily objectives and actionable points that they want to accomplish, when people who have that, and kindness is one of those actionable points, I think they're the ones that end up getting hurt the worst. Because this is a person that actually goes into the world, or is a part of the world, and expects and hopes to see the good in people, and is looking for opportunities to be kind to people. And all you have to do is to have been the victim of some type of scam or some type of situation where you were taken advantage of, for your view of what the world is and how you want to see the world to begin to shift.
Yeah.
I remember 21 years old, and it was early in the morning, and it was raining, and I ran from my apartment down to the parking lot to get in my car, and I opened the door and sat down in the car and looked down to see this giant hole where my stereo used to be. And that was probably the first time that I ever had this real feeling of violation in that way. Now, you know, somebody steals your lunch money. That's bad. That hurts. That's at a different level. But the first time you see that somebody actually went out of their way to commit a crime, and you are the one that's going to end up paying the price for that crime, I can still remember it. I can feel the feeling in my body that I felt when I saw that. And it morphed from one feeling to the other. And those, included shock and disgust and rage and all different kinds of things. So when you take something as simple as a car stereo, and you jump up the level of what's going on, and the cost becomes greater, whether it's personal or financial, those feelings are magnified exponentially. And it makes it difficult to be the kind of person you want to be. Therefore, requiring an extra source of grace that we cannot generate on our own.
Oh, I believe that to be true. That's true. Yeah. After I was raped in college, and I was raped by a friend who was supposed to be giving me a ride home. Okay. That didn't happen. Something else did. I was a mess with men for about 2 years after that. I was terrible to all men. I would make plans with them and stand them up. I was taking out my anger and my rage on, like, I was probably a sociopath or something. During that time. Yeah, for real. And I will say this, I did not know Jesus. And it's funny because after knowing Christ, and I came to know Christ because my husband was a Christian, and I liked him, but you couldn't take advantage of him. I was dating somebody else at the time. He's like, yeah, I want to ask you out, but you're dating somebody else, and that's not my vibe. So, and I'm like, wait, what? You have standards. All right. And the Lord just kind of led me into that space. But you have that happening in a marriage where, and I think you said a big word a minute ago. You said expectations. Looking for opportunity. I think both people, and you and I both have done enough coaching and you've done counseling, I have not, but you work with enough people. The majority of people are good, and they have reasons for what they do, even if they're crazy reasons, like that make no sense rationally. They do have a reason for the way that they're doing things. And, creating a different mindset in that space takes some time, some patience, and all of that. But we're operating out of these hurts. And I see this happen over and over again. where it's traditionally women, but I see it with men too, where we have this expectation that the guy or gal is going to be doing something in a certain way, and we're surprised and then disappointed because they don't.
Right.
And then in reality, that person is just trying to get their day going, or moving through a difficult thing, or thinking about something completely different, and then so that expectation isn't helpful, and then we don't even do anything with it, so we've let them walk on us, right? Or our people let that happen and don't know what to do, and then so it happens again, and then they're like, what do we so you just reinforce this behavior that the other person may or may not be even aware of. And so when you're thinking about how do you handle stuff like that, when you're dealing with extreme selfishness in a relationship, like, what do you do if you're on the receiving end of that?
That is a question that is probably the counselor's nightmare. Because you have a person that's on the receiving end of unfair, selfish, egocentric types of behaviors. And when there's a ring involved,
Oh yeah.
it becomes a very difficult scenario to even begin thinking about, is this a relationship that's sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it doesn't matter whether you're a believer or not. There are some situations and some circumstances in marriages that are not sustainable. There are some situations and circumstances, as much as we do the best we can to follow God's word when it comes to marriage and keeping it and staying in it and being committed to it and faithful to it, there are circumstances and situations where a person's, their personhood is at stake.
Mm-hmm.
Their ability to survive and thrive as an individual has been taken from them. And when we begin working with an individual who's been in that situation, and then they begin to see the fault in their thinking, they begin to see that they are a person of value and worth, and they begin to stand on their own 2 feet again, we have some confrontation that's about to happen.
Oh yes. And years of it,
Yes.
even. And I would post, and I don't know that there's many people that can do this without like a whole ton of support people, right?
Yeah, right.
But if you stick it out and you have boundaries and you have firm yes and no, and you're kind and you're gentle, like the other person learns, oh, this no longer works anymore. And then you can be clear and direct and say, if you want to do this with me, I want that, but this is how it needs to be different. So I want to see that, and I'm not doing that way anymore. And then they get to make a choice, right? This stuff is no joke. It is the hardest, most brutal, and we want somebody else to fix it.
Yeah.
And we're the ones that have to level up to create something. And it's not easy to do unless you have a ton of people supporting you. Because most people are like, I just want you to be happy. Just divorce, please. Stop fighting in front of your kids because that conflict's terrible for them. And they're not wrong, right? They're not
Exactly.
wrong. So learning how to do all those things and create conflict and do that well, that's why Greater Impact exists, because that's what we help people do. It is not an overnight thing, though. It takes about a year to start making shifts.
At least.
Yeah.
And I could show you from personal / professional experience with clients that someone who is at the door of deciding that they're not worth having around anymore because of the way they've been treated by their spouse, just the part of getting them back up off the mat.
Yeah. Hello.
And beginning to stand on their own 2 feet and breathe again and say, I am a person of worth. That's months of work.
Yeah, exactly.
When you start the process of educating someone in terms of what an effective valuable confrontation looks like and all the dynamics that have to go behind that. And by the way, I'm moving away, and just a little PSA here. I'm moving away from that word because it carries so much toxin with it.
What?
Confrontation.
Okay.
I'm moving away from it. I'm trying to rid my own vocabulary of it and turn that word, where relationships are concerned, into courageous conversations.
Oh, I love that.
Okay. Because a well done confrontation requires courage.
Well, and that's the thing right there, because most people don't have that, even if they're not being trod upon.
Yeah.
Like, even if they're so blessed that they're married to somebody who's not a sociopath in that moment, or for the majority of the time, that people hate conflict. They
do.
And it takes courage. You're absolutely right. It does take courage. And even with that, I think this is a piece of it too. You have to be willing for that other person to walk away, because there are people that if they can't get their way, no matter how kind and loving and gentle and firm and respectful, and you have boundaries that are reasonable and all that, they're like, I'm done with you. Because they're sociopaths, I guess, right?
Well,
So
it's a power trip. It's a power trip. Anybody that's going to treat someone with that much disregard and that much disrespect on the regular, while saying with their mouth that they love this person, is into the power that they gain from being able to do and see a result and say, I did that and I can do it again.
So do you think that some people grow up with like a really warped sense of what love actually is?
Some people.
Okay.
Are you kidding me right now?
Okay.
Absolutely.
What do you really think? Like, don't hold back.
Well, the first thing is their own household. Where were they brought up? What did they see? Did they see examples and models of people who understand the value and the sacrifice of true love and what it means to put the other person's needs above your own and actually follow through with that, not just say it with their mouth?
Right.
What when you see all around you, and it's not just at home, and it's not just in marriages, it's in relationships, we see it in teachers, we see it in all kinds. I'm so worked up right now, I can't even think of the words that I can't use my words.
So sorry.
but we see so many examples of situations where it's about getting mine, it's about getting what I want, it's about achieving the feeling that I'm successful and that I have the power here, that truly learning how to love someone is not one of the boxes that we think needs to be checked off.
Yeah.
And the thing, if we want to go back to our friend, not that we know her personally, but someone we talk about frequently and use her materials frequently, Dr. Brene Brown, who says, you will never, ever understand the feeling, the level, the value of what all that love can do and bring to you until you learn how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is people who do everything they can to not crawl, not walk, but run as fast as they can away from vulnerability.
Yeah, spot on.
But let's tie that into where we started. Because if we're running away from vulnerability, there's got to be a reason for it. And if it's not in relationships we have, societally, now it is in where we've been ripped off, where we've been scammed, where we've been victimized.
Yeah.
And it becomes difficult to trust anybody. And you cannot be vulnerable without some level of trust. And there are levels of vulnerability as well. We're not talking about going into Best Buy, and expecting to be told the truth by a salesperson and buy something and get what we paid for. That's a level of vulnerability. Yeah. But we're talking about people who've literally placed their souls in the hands of another person. And then for what? As often or more often than not, that turns into a bad deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it requires our own deep connection with the Lord, I think, to be able to even begin to scratch the surface of what that means. I've been praying for about a decade for God to teach me how to love. I mean, like most people, I have a few people that I find challenging to love well. And what I've learned through that process is that these people tip over something that's already within me that needs healing, needs addressed. And I've gone from being resentful of that person and their behavior to thankful of the opportunity to work whatever that is out with the Lord, because I don't want to be one of these people that's easily offended. And there's so many people that are so easily offended.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got somebody in my life right now that, like, I can't say anything without it offending this person. And I mean, it literally doesn't matter what it is. Every conversation within 5 minutes. And I'm good with people. Like, I'm just, wow, this is something. What do you do with that? Well, I've decided it's not all my fault. I own what's mine to own and meet them in that, validate their experience. And, then later I'll come back and say, and I don't do this with everything, but sometimes I come back and say, are you open to a different perspective than your own around what happened that day? And that's a question that if you ask that, most people will say, well, of course I'm open, because they want to be open. And then you tell them and it makes them angry. And you got to be careful how you tell them. But even when you employ all of the cushioning, it's like, well, you shouldn't be thinking like that. Like, well, I know. And I realize that.
Yeah.
You XYZ, and you're still, is that still true? Like, that was your perspective. It's like, yeah. Okay, well, I have a different one. And as entitled as you are to yours, and I do see it, you've agreed that I see it, I also am entitled to mine. And this is where identity comes in, because when we know who we are, we're not going to align with somebody else just because they're there and loud or hello, emotional. Right?
Right. And those who know the least know it the loudest.
Mm-hmm.
And so the loudest people are the ones who probably we need to stay away from. Can I make a point about being offended?
Yeah.
2 things. Number 1, being offended is a choice. It's up to you. You can either be offended or not. It depends on, I guess, where your level of sensitivity is dialed.
Yep.
But the people who are offended the most and the most frequently and play the game of victimitis, I'm a victim and I'm going to be a victim. And gosh, it's what we're looking for, we find.
Yeah.
And so that opportunity to be a victim is there. Where do you think, let's just say on a scale, on a knob, remember the old school stereos that had knobs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
0 over here and 10 over there, or depending on which way you're looking. Yeah. Let's just say 0 is not much or none. And 10 is this open, intentional vulnerability. Where do you think people who get victimized all the time, where do you think their vulnerability level is?
Oh, that's a great question, because you could argue either, right?
You could.
Yeah. So I want to hear from the expert.
Let me go find one.
No, I'm talking to you,
Let's
sir.
see if I have one hiding here in my office. Well, you can look at it, but I'm talking about the serial victims. People who expect to be victimized, people who almost seem to want to be victimized. And we're seeing that's part of this shift in the society. And I don't want to be a, professor of doom or anything like that. And I'm not a professor at all, but I'm going to say a 0. And I'm going to say they are choosing to be offended, and they are easily offended because they've shut their vulnerability off completely. Completely. And they don't have any room to see 2 sides of anything. They don't have any room to see that this person who has just offended you, may have had 0 intent of doing that. And they may have just been saying something that included a word that you're sensitive to. And suddenly you've written them off. Okay. That is, I've shut vulnerability down. I'm not, I'm not going to allow myself that. Therefore,
Mhm.
anything that contradicts my narrative, I'm going to shut it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Who hasn't done that? I mean, I think we're all masters at that. It's just, do you do that in every circumstance, every situation,
Yeah,
or most of them? So does that then, the lack of vulnerability, tie into sociopathy?
without question, in my opinion, expert or no.
So these are
Yeah.
the people at Thanksgiving that are sitting there judging all of everything.
Well, they're sitting there thinking about what a waste of time this is, and what, they're critical.
Mhm.
Uh, they they act impulsively. They lie. They lack regard for their own safety and the safety of others. They have no regard for the cost, uh, physically, emotionally, financially, and everything is, everybody else is a joke to them, it seems.
So those people don't sound very grateful or joyful.
Again, do I have to ask you that question? Are you kidding me right now?
Well, all of
No, they're
what you
not.
just,
They're not looking for that.
right. And they're finding what they're looking for, which
Exactly.
is, I mean, we create our own reality. So you want to, and social media, oh, I hate what it's doing to young girls these days. It's creating all sorts of mental dis-ease. I mean, there's actual correlations between social media time and mental illness. It's
Oh, no
really
question.
not a good thing.
And it's so intentional, with the algorithms and the different parts of technology, that it was never intended. Once it got off the ground, it was never intended to be about us communicating with people, catching up with people. It was intended from the get-go to be about commercial
Yeah, money.
control
Yeah.
for the most part. And then it's a sociopathic platform.
Social media. Oh, sociopathic platform. Yep.
And the thing is, social is in there in both words.
Yeah.
And so, but one of them hooks us and says, oh, this is good, this is fun, this is a great way to spend my time.
Mm-hmm.
Not, and the other is supposed to be something bad. Well, I think they both achieve somewhat the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to recommend to our listeners that if they're looking at Christmas dinner and who's going to be coming to the table, I want to give them permission to not invite that dude that's, or woman who's, just terrible and brings everybody in the room down. I'm going to encourage you to just say no, unless God brings you into a space where you're going to minister to that person and you get your armor on and maybe even rally the whole family. And this is our ministry thing we're doing this year, is we're not going to let Aunt Susan destroy Christmas again. We're going to be so positive. We're going to agree with her. We're going to validate her. We're going to not fight with her. We are going to refuse to be offended. Like, that might be your thing. Or it might be, hey, Susan, we're just not doing it at our house this year. Then you just go to your daughter-in-law's, like that.
I love
Whatever.
that.
I don't know. Just do something different.
Well, we're trying to create memories,
Right.
and with holidays and family. And wouldn't it be good if you say, okay, if one of the objectives of this time together is to create memories, that they be good ones?
Oh, hello.
you know
Yes.
I mean, instead, because the stories that get told later in the generations, some of them are about the good memories, but just as many, if not more, are about the total disasters
Yeah.
of holidays, based on somebody's behavior, or how much they've had to drink, or just as much. You talked about the empty chair, based on someone that once was there that now is not. There's got to be a chair for somebody that you love who's attached to somebody that you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a very difficult call to say. We don't want to be judgmental, and we don't want to make assumptions about what people are going to say or do where their behavior is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we want to protect that space and keep it positive and keep it happy and fun and
Yeah.
light. And These times tend to bring out other things in
Yeah, for
people
sure.
rather than that.
And I have the blessing of being able to be with my people frequently. And I honestly really believed we could invite anybody, and we have had people at Christmas that, like, I didn't even know them till they showed up because of relationships our kids have had with them. And it's been amazing. Like, I would like that to continue. But I think part of the reason that it's easy for us is we see each other outside of it. I think it's much harder to have that kind of grace if this is the only time you get to all be together. But I would post that, what if it didn't matter? Like, what if the thing you're afraid of isn't real? Because most of the time it's not.
Right.
What if everybody could just be together and be a blessing to each other? And that strange person might be the one that everybody behaves a little better in front of, because that makes a thing too.
But you want to talk about a courageous conversation.
Yeah.
To talk to somebody beforehand and say, look, we love you. We want you to be a part of this. Looking back, you want me to show you the video? Because most of it's on film now.
Yeah.
Looking back, there have been some unfortunate incidents and situations, and I really want to encourage you to see if you can avoid that this time.
Yeah.
Because we do want you here.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult conversation to have. And not everybody feels like they're capable of having it.
So start small. When you don't get your fries, ask for them. That's a thing too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I was with a friend a few weeks ago in another state, and we were getting burgers. And I remember it'd been a long day and he was frazzled. And he ordered his burger very specifically. And I think the lady says, "Do you want mayonnaise on that?" And he just said, "If I'd have wanted mayonnaise on it, I'd have ordered it." And of course, then I'm just going, I'm not with him. I'm not, I'm running the other direction. But how easy would it have just been to say, "No, thank you."
No, thank you. Yeah.
So we have choices in those situations, even when we are frazzled.
Right.
Even when we are. But we've just made this time of year to be something I think way bigger than it was ever intended to be.
Yeah.
And I don't mean bigger from the standpoint of what it represents. I'm talking about bigger from the standpoint of what it's become.
Yeah. It is one of the most stressful times of the year. People go into January, and then the next thing that happens is Divorce Monday. That first week of January is, statistically speaking, the biggest week of the year when divorces are filed.
Yep.
So we want to recommend that you don't spend the money that you don't have. You cannot buy happiness for yourself or others. You cannot buy true gratitude. Create memories, have fun together. Get one of those free online games where you print out cards and ask people questions. There's tons of that stuff.
Yeah.
Just be together, have fun.
Can I add one more thing before we go away?
Yeah, please do.
One of the things I did with my kids, I'm not going to say from the get-go, but as I began to realize the damage that some of the things that happened at Christmas was doing, just in terms of how many gifts they got and how much even we were buying for them, and said it's time to put a stop to this. So I'm not giving this any theological credibility. It's just an example that we used. And we said, Christmas is about Jesus and his birth. And at Jesus' birth, he got 3 gifts from the wise men: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Why should we get any more? So we had a discussion with our children about this and said, this is the way that we're going to go with Christmas.
I love this.
Gold was going to be something nice that they wanted and had asked for. Frankincense was going to be something that would be interactive with us. And myrrh was going to be something spiritually educational.
Nice.
And they were happy with it. They were totally cool with it.
Yeah.
They never complained about it one time ever. And so I'm not saying that everybody should do that, but think about the gift giving and the buying and the spending and all that kind of a thing, all of those kinds of things, somewhere along those lines, because I really believe that, what we end up doing on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning is feeds all of this frenzy and feeds all of the stress and the anxiety and the debt and things like that. It is not worth going into debt over.
Yep.
Ever.
Yep. I love that. That is great advice, especially for young parents. And even like I'm sitting here going, okay, I've got adult children now, that we could even implement something like that, because we've been dialing back. And then we never made it like this ginormous thing anyway, but we really want to celebrate the Lord, and we want to make it a memory that's good.
Yes.
So, yeah. Well, thanks for coming by, guys, and listening and watching today on What to Say and How to Say It. If you want some free resources, stop walking on eggshells. Find your voice. It's a free tool, downloadable PDF that you can grab off of greaterimpact.org. And it'll help you maybe handle some of these conversations that require some courage. So thanks for coming, Kyle. Thanks for listening, everyone.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for stopping by. Bye-bye.